Iuchar, welcome to a week in the life of a Gaelic writer. This week I'm going to be talking about editing and about the differences between editing in English and editing in Gaelic. But before I get into that, I want to say a big thank you to the Federation of Writers Scotland, because on Tuesday evening last week I was their guest at the Traverse Theatre and I was talking about some of my books, and I had a lovely conversation with Marcus Machgan-Turner, who chaired the event, so thank you very much to Marcus. It was lovely to see him again. And I also want to thank Roseanne Fraser-Ritchie, who broadcast the whole event on Facebook Live. So if you didn't manage to get along to the Traverse on Tuesday and you want to find out what we said, you can visit the Federation's Facebook page. I will put a link in the description underneath the video and you can catch up there. So on to the topic of the week, which is editing. I have spent the past 2 weeks working on an English language novel, and this is the approach I've taken. I was sent the manuscript, and the first thing I did was just to read it through for the story, not making any notes, not marking anything, not changing anything, just understanding what the story is about. And then the next step was to go through the whole manuscript on paper with a red pen and to mark anything that I thought needed attention. So I'm looking for spelling, grammar, punctuation, style, and by style I mean that some publishers follow, let's say, Chambers Dictionary, and others follow this one here. This is the New Oxford Spelling Dictionary, which I have been using a lot in the past couple of weeks, and every publisher has its own preferences. So if you're working for a number of different publishers, if you're freelancing and you're jumping from publisher to publisher, then you have to be sure that you're following the right style. Also, what you're looking for is anything that doesn't make sense in the story. So if there are plot holes and inconsistencies and continuity errors and timelines that don't quite work out. And I have to say that in the case of this novel, there were no big structural problems to sort out. This is a novel that was well developed before I ever got my hands on it, and a lot of work had gone into it, and that was evident in reading it for the first time. It may be that in some projects you will have to work on a manuscript that's much rougher, where there are some big things to sort out like that, and you would have to have that conversation with the author to sort out some big changes. But in this case that was not necessary because all that work had been done. And so really I was looking for little things, minor rephrases here and there. There weren't huge things to change. Then, having done all of that on paper, I then go to the electronic file and input all my red pen corrections into the file. And I should say that stages 2 and 3 are very time consuming because you have to look up lots and lots of things. So for example, the New Oxford Spelling Dictionary is excellent for, I found myself referring to this a lot, for compound words. That is to say, words that are a word such as bathtub. Is it 2 words? Bathtub, is it hyphenated, or is it bathtub, or 1 word? Well, according to the New Oxford Spelling Dictionary, it is 1 word. So every time you come across something that looks, where you're not sure, should that be hyphenated, should it be 2 words, all of these things have to be looked up, and as I say, different publishers apply different styles, so you have to keep an eye out for that sort of thing. So having done that on paper, then having input all that into the electronic file, then I read it again, which is now the 4th time on the screen, and I'm looking for anything else that I might have missed in stages 2 and 3. And at that point you also start to notice little things. You want to maybe change little phrases here and there, but you've got to take as light a touch as possible, I find. What you're definitely not trying to do is impose your ideas on the author. The author will have spent months, years possibly, working on this text writing, rewriting, refining it, crafting it. And then, of course, if an editor comes in and says, oh, no, you're going to do it my way, that's not the object of the exercise at all. What the editor is trying to do is to make this text the best possible version of itself that it can be, so that the author's voice sings out, and so that it is very much their book, but a version of their book that needed someone else to cast their eye over it. You'll know yourself if you write that you can get very bogged down in your own work, and you can't step far enough back from it to see things that might need to be changed. And that perspective is something that an editor can provide. The other thing that you're trying to do, of course, is you want the book to be the author's and to be their voice and what they want to say, but you are also working for a publisher who will want the book to fit with their style. So in a sense, you, as the editor, are reconciling the author's voice with the publisher's style. So, as I said, this book has been my friend this past couple of weeks. I have looked this up a lot. I really wish it was online. It would be so useful if you could have a PDF or an online version of this. That would help enormously. But as it is, we're relying on good old-fashioned books. There are two other books that complement this, and one of these is Hart's Rules for Compositors and Readers, and the other is the Oxford Dictionary for Writers and Editors, both of which are very useful if you have style questions about how to write foreign words, what should be capitalized or lowercase, how to use numerals, how to refer to geographical features, because what you're aiming for is consistency. Now, both of these are not the most recent editions of these books, and I need to update those. But this one, the New Oxford Spelling Dictionary, is the latest edition, and very, very useful it is too. So, how is it different when you're doing all this in Gaelic? Well, the first thing I'd say is about resources, because which dictionary are you going to use? Is a publisher going to say, well, we always use Dwelly? It's unlikely that any publisher would say use Dwelly, because Dwelly's spelling has been superseded by the Gaelic orthographic conventions. This, and as you can see, this is a thin little book. This is not going to contain all the words you're ever going to have to look up. What it does contain, though, are some rules for how to spell. Gaelic orthography, or spelling, was standardised in the 1980s by the Scottish Education Board, whose successor body is now the Scottish Qualifications Authority, because it was felt that the variations in Gaelic spelling were confusing and that it didn't give exam candidates a standard that they should meet when they were presenting written work in Gaelic. And the Gaelic orthographic conventions offered new guidance on how to standardise and simplify spelling. And some people liked them and some people didn't, and some people still don't want to write that way, but largely publishers nowadays are following the Gaelic orthographic conventions. These ones, as you can see, have been revised in 2005. This is online, but it's not a very easily searchable document, which I think is a shame. It's something to do with the way the PDF has been set up. And yet, there will still be cases in which you come across a word and you don't know how to deal with it, and GOC doesn't really offer you a rule. It doesn't attempt to offer a comprehensive list. It offers a rule that you are invited to apply, and then every editor is wondering, have I got this right? So the resources that are available are a comprehensive but very old dictionary. This is online, of course, thanks to Michael Bauer. There are other dictionaries. I like Colin Mark. I find this a useful dictionary to refer to. There are a couple of other dictionaries, but their word lists are not very long. So an editor will always find themselves having to make a decision without having the luxury that the English writer has of going to a dictionary such as the new Oxford Spelling Dictionary, where they can say, okay, it says here that's how you do it, that's how we'll do it. And of course, one Gaelic editor may do something one way, and another editor might do it a different way altogether. There are some other resources. This one is called Coachgler Gaelic, the Scottish Gaelic Thesaurus. I have a copy of this. I don't think I've ever used it. I find it an utterly useless document. It's written by the European Language Initiative, or rather it's compiled and published by the European Language Initiative, the same people who made the Fachlanner Parliament. Again, another project that set out to do a good thing and managed not to achieve anything very useful, because their word list was created in the early 2000s and politics has moved on, and there are lots and lots of terms that you need a name for, and the European Language Initiative stopped after the publication. There was a period during which you could add things to the list, but thereafter it just ossified. So it's sitting there like a snapshot in time, not being very useful, and I think that their thesaurus is probably just about as useful, and that's why I never use it. So is the process different? The resources are different, certainly. The resources are fewer, less standardised, and I don't want to say less authoritative, but they give you the rule, they put the ball in your court, and you as the editor have to decide. Or maybe you have to go to some fellow editors and say, look, I've got this dilemma, what should I do here? Whereas for the English editor, you just say, fine, that's how it is in Chambers, that's how it is in the Collins Dictionary, that's how it is in the new Oxford Spelling Dictionary, that's how I'll do it. The process, I'd say, for Gaelic is the same. You go through the text the same number of times, possibly more, I think. The only other thing that I'd say is different is that a lot of the language you will find in a first draft of a Gaelic novel is likely to be, it's likely to have more errors in it than its equivalent in English would. And this is to do with literacy, and it's a legacy of the neglect of Gaelic in the education system, and simply of the amount of Gaelic written material that any person will have encountered in their lifetime. I'm sure that most Gaelic writers would not be ashamed to say that they are more strongly literate in English than they are in Gaelic, even if Gaelic is the language that they write in mostly, simply because we're surrounded everywhere in our lives by English, but you have to seek out Gaelic and pursue it deliberately in order to encounter Gaelic texts. And so when you come to write a Gaelic text, it's likely that you'll make some mistakes that you wouldn't make in English. It's just to do with frequency and exposure. So I would say that, given my experience of editing in both languages, the Gaelic process is a little bumpier in the early stages than is the English process. And that is not to disparage in any way the efforts of Gaelic writers, because we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to deal with a language that is seeking to find a standardised form that we can all deal with. And what I'm most concerned with is the creative rather than the orthographical aspects of writing in Gaelic, because if you can sort out the story, then everything else can be fixed after that. But once you've got the texts into a reasonable state, then the later stages of revision and copy editing and proofreading and so on are the same for both Gaelic and English. I'd be really interested to hear from Gaelic writers and other editors, and indeed anyone else who's editing in more than one language, to see if there are differences and parallels and problems that crop up, and to know how you deal with them. So that's what's been keeping me busy for the past couple of weeks, is this English novel, and we'll see. I will tell you more about it as we get nearer to the publication date, but In the meantime, I'm going to be turning my attention to other projects for the next week, and I will tell you about those when I speak to you again. Go sa féich mí riisih mar sin léamh.